All right, welcome to meeting 6. We're recording. I'll post it to the Summer Voice page afterward. So if you need to take off early, that's fine. You can always catch up that way. Captions are available.
Planting those trees in front of the Winter Hill Bank.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Oh no. My internet is
Mouse and
unstable.
button. You're kind of stuck. There you
Yeah,
go.
I realized that. Shoot. I'm gonna try switching networks, cross my fingers.
See you moving now.
Yeah?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
I hear you.
Okay.
That's so good.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Hopefully this will hold out on me then. Captions are available. If you click the 3 dots and the more button, you can turn captions on that way. If you've got any other tech issues, please ask Courtney. Michael's going to take minutes for us today, but if we're in breakout rooms, I'll ask that you assign someone to kind of keep track of what's up in your conversations. And we'll go till 5:15 officially, but stick around longer if you want to keep chatting. All right, let me share my screen. So we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday in many ways and try to kind of take it a little bit further toward prioritizing the many ideas that we have and the things that we want. We will start off just with a lightning talk from Louisa about the project budget, how this kind of works on the municipal side in terms of funding, what the scope of the project can be as a result of some of those limitations, and how it gets applied through the city side. And then we'll do the same thing we did last time, which is breaking out into breakout rooms. We'll be in the same groups, and then we'll do reporting out. We didn't have much time for that last time, so I'm hoping we can get a little more for it this time. We'll do a public comment at the end. We've got one person here. Thank you so much for coming. We're really happy to have the public here anytime. We do reserve most of the meeting for the committee's work, but we do set aside 5 minutes at the end of the meeting for public comment. If you can't stick around that long, let me put in the chat. It's both a Google form and also just the Summer Voice page that also has a questions, comments field that you can post things in if you want. So still waiting to pin down a date for this Blessing of the Bay Meadow field trip. We're trying to coordinate with Kate Kennan, and it's a busy season and also vacation season for a lot of people. So we're just trying to get all that squared away, but it'll be in July, and I will keep you posted. I also wanted to see, should we pick up again the idea of doing a field trip to the garden center? I know we thought we were going to get rained out. We actually didn't get rained out, but did we pick that back up? Are people interested in doing that? That one would be more in the evening. Probably the Blessing of the Bay visit would be during a work day, I'm assuming. So I don't know how many people would be able to attend, but that might be the limitation of Kate Kennan's schedule, given that it's her job. So is that of interest to people to have an evening thing as well still? Yeah. I see a couple nods. I'll work with Lisa on trying to find a new date for that then. Cool, sounds up. Any announcements that people want to mention, events, things coming up? You can just unmute yourself. Nothing at the moment. Cool.
I actually have an announcement. I'll probably email you all, but NOFA Mass is having a summer conference online and in person. Evenings online, Monday, July 24th through Friday, the 28th, and then in person and online on Saturday, the 29th at Worcester State University. And for the first time ever, there's going to be a big pollinator track, going to be some awesome talks, and it'd be great to show them that pollinators are an important part of the conference. So if you want to go, you can email me. I'm happy to, I'll put my email in the chat. I'm happy to connect you with the link for, actually, I will put the link in the chat and then you can just do it on your own. But it's going to be great. One ticket gets you in to everything. It's a sliding scale. And I think it's going to be some really awesome presentations. So I hope to see you there.
Thanks, Renee. Okay, with that, we're going to turn it over to Louisa. If you're ready to jump in, Louisa, give us a little intro to municipal budget and planning.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is a very, very, very simple primer, but it's often clear when we are talking about how we fund projects that folks don't really know where money is coming from. And the reason for having this conversation is really for us to keep it in mind when we are thinking about either pilot projects or follow-up work for the pollinator action plan. So obviously, when a city is spending money, it's coming from it's not exhaustive, but the biggest buckets of money are either federal money that the federal government is giving us. So like ARPA is federal allocation, CDBG, which stands for Community Development and Block Grants, comes from HUD. There's money from, could be from USDA or other big federal agencies that they distribute through cities and states. That's one bucket of where we get money. We also have a city budget that is drawn on from revenue. So a parking ticket, which is actually very small percentage of the budget. People always ask that. Parking tickets, property taxes, all of those fees, and including sometimes developer monies that they give in stabilization accounts. It's also a place where the city can get money. And then when we don't have money, we go to the bank, just like any regular person would, and we get municipal bonds. Right now, our finance guy is in heaven because we have gotten the highest municipal rating. Cambridge has had this for quite some time, but Somerville finally did. We're AAA rated, which is a very, very big deal because it means we can borrow against lower interest rates because they know that we will pay. And in the city budget, I want to just point out that, for example, when we as a division need a new staff person or want to propose a program, that we go and do what's called a program improvement request. So this advisory committee is working on something that a program improvement request last budget season asked to hire an ecological restoration planner. And this budget season, we were granted money for the Miyawaki forest that we're working on. So that is how different divisions within the city are able to request things from the administration through a public program improvement request. And then the city council will either approve it or deny it. And the third bucket is grants. And there are 1 million grants. And I mention this because there will probably be pilot projects or initiatives that we want to do that we'll have to apply for grants for. And we are pretty aggressive about pursuing grants in the city of Somerville. We have some grant writers, and we, for example, when we work on parks, we often go for state park grants that are now $500,000. And I would also put in this category the CPA, which funds a lot of our open space improvements and can be used for housing or historic. So these are kind of the three main buckets And beyond that, there is no real magical place where we just get money. We actually, our budget can never be changed except at the budget season. So the public space and urban forestry budget has exactly this set amount of money. As I said, we were very lucky because we got $60,000 for the Miyawaki Forest, and we got $100,000 for the Pollinator Action Plan last year. Does anybody have any questions specifically about municipal funding? I think that means no, so maybe we'll move to the next topic. So we have $100,000 for this Pollinator Action Plan. And when Allison and I were talking, we were saying, well, does anybody have a notion of what $100,000, what that will buy us, right? It's not going to buy us the stop of pollinator decline, but it is specifically going to buy us a product. And that's where the RFP is super important and where we need to think about what we're asking for in an RFP. So just comparable other projects. For example, there was a tree inventory done in 2018, I want to say, that came from a 2008 inventory. I might be wrong. Vanessa knows all these numbers, but so they are updating that tree inventory, and that's going to be about $100,000. They're looking at 14,000 public trees, but that's all they're doing. They're going in, there's a database, and they're updating it. They're not giving recommendations. They're not spending money on making a plan. We do have a tree plan. We did it for very little money, partly because we have a Vanessa and other cities don't. Cambridge, for example, spent $1.7 million on their tree plan. They have some sophisticated data that we don't have, but $1.7 million is quite a lot to spend on a plan. Tree pruning and maintenance. Every year we have our trees on a rotating proactive schedule, and we are able to evaluate, make a health card for, and then do proactive maintenance for 6 to 7 parks every year. That's about $100,000. That's people going out on a truck doing that stuff. Whenever we hire a landscape architect to lead the community process, do a design, do the construction documents, which is a pretty intricate set of what happens exactly where and how, and then oversee the construction of a park. It runs, depending on how big they are, from $85,000 to $100,000. Right now, we've seen a huge increase in construction and consultant costs. So we should also realize that $100,000 3 years ago is not $100,000 today. And then just as like a very kind of real world comparison, we could buy 2 big belly compost compactors, the side-by-side trash and recycling. Each one of those costs about $10,000. So we could buy 10 of them with this $100,000. And then hopefully we can get this Somerville Pollinator Action Plan done for $100,000. So just to kind of give you an idea, I'm kind of interested in hearing if you thought this was a lot of money or not enough money, or if you ever had any thoughts, or did you even know that we have $100,000 set aside for this? Raise your hand if you knew we had $100,000. Raise your hand if you were like, wow, that's a lot of money. Oh, we're all like, it's a lot. And everybody else is like, not enough. Michael Fager, did you think it was a lot?
I have to say no, because I was on the CPA for 6 years, so I know that 100,000 is not a lot of money. I'm shocked that
not a lot.
I'm shocked that big bellies are 10K for 2 of them.
It's a double wide though. Remember,
Still,
it's
that's
like and with the foot pedal. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, it's not a lot of money by way of like what CPA is funding, but remember that those are usually construction things. For a plan, it's a pretty healthy budget. We should be getting something that's quite useful. I don't know, maybe Allison, I don't know if you know how much the other pollinator action plans, what the consultants got paid. I think they were done quite some time ago.
Well, the ones that are done at Conway, because they're done by students, are done for very cheap.
Yeah,
I don't know what the planning costs are, but they're under $10,000 for sure. But you're also working with people who are very new at it, so that's the risk you take.
and then I think they probably pay, like the one that man Evan did, he probably got paid to do it. Did he use the Conway folks to gather data?
No, Evan started his own company after leaving Conway, and so he's getting paid from, by municipalities and other folks.
But we
I'm
don't
not
know,
sure
we don't know
what-
how much.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure.
Okay, so that's just kind of a more or less, you can now go buy a Big Belly and be like, that costs $10,000. Let's go to the next slides. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we have to be pretty strategic about what we're asking for in the RFP. So in the RFP, or the request for proposal, you're asking for something very specific, which they then deliver on. The RFP gets folded into the contract and is what they're giving you. So for example, if you were hiring someone to work on your home, you would put the detailed, like remove the trim, paint the trim, install new windows. You would be adding kind of detail of what you are doing. They would give you an amount, and then that would serve as your contract. Like you're paying $16,000 for these services. The RFP is kind of that way. So there are some things that are appropriate to put in an RFP and others that are not. For example, we all want to stop pollinator decline, but we can't put in the scope of work in the RFP, stop pollinator decline. That is too big and amorphous of a task, right? So we need to think about what is the role of this plan in that? What does this plan do specifically? And what are the steps in it? Like, what are we buying from these consultants? And I think this is a good example for us to do a little brainstorming on, if I have time, Allison. I think I might. To use like a big kind of concept and break it down. So we're not going to write in the scope of the pollinator action plan, stop pollinator decline. But what are some things we could actually put in the scope? Go ahead, Cynthia.
We could say that we want to increase pollinator habitat.
Okay,
Within
so
the
that's
city?
like but even that, because we're not buying a service where they're increasing pollinator habitat, but what we are buying is understanding like where
How? Yeah.
and
where?
how, right? Like,
Yeah,
where
because
would have the
I
most
figure
benefit?
like an analysis of what we have and what are some options for a sustainable, viable pathway.
That's right.
Or more than one pathway, but let's keep it simple and call it one
So
pathway.
this team is going to tell us like how to increase pollinator habitat. And they're probably going to do it in very specific ways. And we can get more. I have another slide that gets more into the details of that. But I'm bringing this up to try to bring your mind into like, we know we want this big thing, but then how do we actually make a piece of paper that is a contract that we can hold them to that is useful to us? So another example in conversations that I've heard is like, this is a regional eco problem. Absolutely. There are no borders at Cambridge or even Framingham for pollinators or for habitat. But we aren't paying this consultant to create a regional action group, but we are paying this consultant, like what could they do that would help us to get to this larger goal? What are some ideas?
We had talked about just knowing what the social landscape is of who's working on this where.
So that in RFP language could be to identify existing groups that are already working on this in order to form a coalition. Like maybe that's something that the advisory committee does, or is an action step in the plan. So the plan doesn't do that, but we do expect, we could write in there, identify groups, advocacy and scientific university groups that are working on this, right? And that they can do, you know, instead of us spending the time looking at all of these things, they can identify those groups, they can even get us contacts. So that's like something very, very concrete that we can buy. So the reason I'm bringing up these ideas or these examples is for us to understand that there's like very big ideas that we want this to do, but we have to take a $100,000 step. And that $100,000 step should have recommendations for other things that then could necessitate grants or a program improvement request or participatory budget request or other things. So I just want to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the stuff that we just kind of generated. So, you know, how are we going to use this pollinator action plan? Well, we just said this, right? So these consultants can give an understanding of the local and regional context. And by that, I mean the topographical, the plant communities, the pollinator and insect communities. Like these are all things that we can have a better understanding that can be read by others in the city to really kind of understand an analysis of this is what we have in Somerville. The consultant can be providing data of which of the pollinators do we have in Somerville, which of the plants are going to nourish those pollinators, right? Because we often get these conversations where people are like, you should use this plant, it feeds 563 pollinators. But then you realize that only 3 of them are present in Massachusetts, or 3 of them are present in Somerville. So this is where we want someone to drill down into the real nuance of which of the animals are here, which of the plants work, and then another layer of where will those plants that feed these animals work in an urban context. If it's a wetland plant, you're not going to put it on a sunny, dry upland area and expect it to live and nurture whatever beetle we're trying to target. So, you know, kind of, and maybe they can't get to every little thing, but there are other groups and other ways for us to know that. That goes along with providing guidance of like, you know, they might decide that, okay, we're going to look at wetlands, we're going to look at different landscape typologies or different pollinator communities or different plant communities. So they should be giving us some guidance on this. And specifically to the urban environment, because it is different than another environment. The urban environment, especially our urban environment, is completely disturbed. We're not going to go back to the 1600s. It's just not a reality. But there are things that we can do to make it the best environment to nurture certain pollinators and to have surviving native species. That's kind of the thing we want them to help us with. I think whereas we're not going to get the whole region and ecoregion to say this is how we're going to do it, we certainly want to create something that's useful and replicable to the ecoregion, right? If we do a pollinator action plan, you can bet Cambridge is going to be looking at it. You can bet Boston is going to be looking at it because we already get the emails saying, tell us when it comes out, tell us when it comes out. And there's some hyper-local difference, but this should be a useful thing to a lot of people in this area, and it doesn't exist, right? They should be able to give us recommendations on how to best do the advocacy and also how to best get the public involved in action, right? So much of our land is in private ownership and is private gardens. They should be helping us figure out how to tap into that and what we can do to really get people excited about creating native gardens and creating native gardens that have the most bang for your buck in terms of supporting pollinators. And then, you know, there are a number of pilot projects that I think have to be included in this. There are a number of citizen science things. I know for the scientists on here that starting a pilot project and then not, you know, and not being able to measure the before and after is less useful. I know we have these conversations a lot with Vanessa, you know, there are a lot of opportunities for this. Now, are they going to do a science project where they're measuring the larva of a very specific animal? No, but they take a set of they can give us a set of recommendations that then we keep working on and partner with. We're in the middle of a place with so many universities, so many people that are interested in this, that for sure there are a lot of opportunities to build this going forward. I think I've probably taken more than my 10 minutes. My watch died, so I'm sorry, Allison.
That's okay. This is great.
But I really was trying to kind of bring together, like, where does the money come from and what does this contract give us, so that we can zero in on what is an RFP going to get us. Does anybody have questions or comments? Great.
Oh,
So now you're just going to craft the RFP. I can't wait to see it.
thanks, Lisa.
I
Okay.
think I might add something. Just so the RFP, as Louisa said, it becomes part of the contract. So it's not that it's the end of the world if we get working and then discover that we need something that we didn't ask for, but just be aware that that's something that then we'd have to negotiate and ask for a price for that additional scope of work. So I think, you know, we oftentimes like $100,000 is our maximum budget, but I think we try to have a dollar amount that's less than $100,000, so that we have a little bit of a cushion if something comes up, and then, you know, we don't have to then go to city council and ask for additional money, that we can really work within the budget that we anticipated from the beginning.
So Courtney brings up something super crucial, which is that when the city signs an RFP or an IFB, which is an invitation for bid, and then people are like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Why didn't you add this? You can't simply just add it on. You have to get an amendment to the contract with the funding that goes with it, or a change order. So what Courtney is saying is, like, if we have 100,000, we might put this out at 90, because then we have a $10,000 cushion. Alternatively, we could have 100,000 and see a second phase of it and go back and ask for a second phase of it. But when I'm training our PSUV team, I say this over and over again: the place to think and be thorough is in the beginning with your RFP, because once the train starts going, you can't simply just add a bunch of things, because their team is also thinking about how much money it's going to cost for them to put this here, to make this product. And you can't change the scope or add more things to the scope, which is called scope creep, without then doing an amendment and getting more money for that. So better to be super thorough in the RFP than to then be chasing amendments and change orders, because they always cost you more than when you put them in. Any other questions? I definitely think that there could be a part 2 of this, which is okay, we have a plan, and then all these recommendations, and then we're going to ask for funding to do this, that, and implement these things.
You can also always ask the staff person in your group, or if you do have other questions that come up. All right, let's jump to the next thing. Thank you so much, Louisa.
Thank you,
You're
Louisa.
welcome. You're welcome.
So we're going to break out into breakout rooms. We don't have all of the same people from last time, but we do also have Renee. So I think we've got enough in each group to pick up where we left off for the most part. Just decide who's going to take notes. You'll use the Jamboard like we did the last time too, but if there's other things of note that would be helpful for recording and sharing with, the general public, then please have someone note those things. So finish whatever questions you were answering. For 2 of the groups, I added additional questions. Only work on those if you have time, but it seems like you might, I'm not sure. And then the most important thing is taking the kind of brainstorming work that you've done and moving them into priority rankings. And I'll show you the Jamboard in a second. And, you know, talk about those. Does this change any of the decisions that you made before? Or is anything missing? And then we're going to take those high priority items and put those into a shared Jamboard group. So we'll all come back together and then each group can present their choices that they've made. The idea here is to have you all kind of take what you've been discussing, take what you're hearing from Louisa about, you know, sort of the project scope, funding, all of that, pull out those highest priority items so we make sure that we're getting those covered in the RFP, and other things may be, you know, less important, things we could do later, things that might come in a phase 2, but that we want to make sure we've got all of the most important stuff in there. And I kind of wanted you all to present to each other to have you kind of vet the ideas against each other. So my thought was you present your top priorities and someone else will ask you devil's advocate questions that you may not actually agree with, just as a way to kind of test the choices that you've made. We'll see if that works. I can also just talk about it, but just as a way to kind of be like, okay, you're making choices right now that I'm now going to translate this week into a written RFP. And so, you know, this isn't the last time you'll see it. You'll get to look at that document. We'll talk about it one more time, but we are getting to the point of like needing to make some decisions. So prioritizing will hopefully be a way that we can help to accomplish that. Again, keep in mind what's feasible to accomplish in this budget, you know, at least attempt to think about that. You may not know exactly. You can ask staff people too. And watch out for tasks that are more recommendations or more something, you know, that will come in a later phase or that other people can do. But we're really asking what the consultant's job will be. Like we talked about this being a job description. And if there are any other lingering questions that you're like, I really want to remember these questions that we talk about this during the process coming up, you can use that shared Google Doc that we have and keep track of those big questions that you're like, I don't need to decide this for the job description portion of this process. But when we're working with the consultant, that might be the right time for us to really think into that question. So just keep those things in mind. I'm going to stop sharing. Give me just 1 second to do this. I'm going to give us 20 minutes. Not a lot of time, but I'm hoping it's enough. And then we'll try to take 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes to present each other's ideas. Okay, Louisa, I'll just put you in one to observe. And Erica, I'll put you in a room as well. Okay, 20 minutes. And keep in mind that you're gonna, oh, I'm gonna show you the Jamboard. I'm sorry, hang on 1 second. So the Jamboard has more pages now. So there's the page that you worked on, and then next to it is a priority page. So use that for working within your group. And then at the very end, you'll see there's one for reporting back. Okay. Let me see. How did it go?
Good.
Whether or not
It's
people
always hard
manage to
to find
get,
those low priority ones. It's always kind of a challenge.
yeah, fair. Want to go by group, and if you didn't manage to get on the report back slide, maybe we can just all navigate to the slide that you were working on your own computer, or I can share my screen. But if everyone has access to it on their own, can we just do it that way? Because then we can all see each other on this one. Okay. So don't have a whole lot of time, so don't take too long to present your ideas, but group one, if you want to just like give us the sort of top priority summary, and then if folks can, like 2 people can think of a devil's advocate question just to like, you know, and then group one can make an argument for your choice. If that doesn't end up working, we'll just chat about it. But if you can think of one, that would just give us a way to have a little bit of like a test of whether or not these ideas are top priority.
Claire or Jack, do you want to talk, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go away, Jack or Courtney. I don't like it.
I'll let Jack, you do it.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say one of the things that was really important to me was making sure the RFP process included a really strong financial feasibility, but also financial efficiency plan. Just because I think so many of the things that we want to do here will be so much easier to push forward if we have a clear understanding of how much they're going to cost and the most cost-effective ways to do them. So I want to make sure that the RFP proposal at the end of the day is strongly focused around finding the most practical and the most expedient solutions that we are able to get, especially just given the kind of limited scope and nature that we have here.
So just to add to that, we just went through each of the 4 questions that we had and did our top priority first, and then we did our low priority, where I would say any sticky that's in our low priority zone is something that was identified as being sort of tangential to some of the larger ideas, and maybe we shouldn't spend so much time thinking specifically about that one item. So for example, low priority being neighboring cities, that we shouldn't just task the consultants with figuring out what other cities want, because we know that other cities will read our document, but we should make sure that we spend time on what we want, if that makes sense. So just sort of like going through the logic. I think Claire was really great about applying the logic of like where we might have had redundant stickies. So that was sort of our methodology. And then the things that we didn't identify as high or low just were thrown in the middle category.
Yeah, just to precise a little bit, which is, you know, because it's hard to put a low somewhere, as, you know, was our lows actually covered somewhere else somehow, right? Or subsumed by something else. So that was our rationale, right?
Yeah.
Anyone want to push back? Have any questions? Yeah,
Well, I
Lisa.
just, given that rationale, how does equity and environmental justice show up somewhere else that's now in low priority?
Equitable access to co-benefits. Right? We felt that it was there. It was a little bit more descriptive, that if we did our job right, then equitable access would cover, equity and environmental justice there. That was our rationale there. Because exactly for that, Lisa, I was like, oh, because it's a
You covered.
right. Okay, good, excellent.
I think also we were working with that, I think Jack mentioned something like 40% of Somerville is still classified by the state as environmental justice neighborhoods. So just based on location, I guess there was a thought that that component would be incorporated in some way.
Yeah, especially by census block, because we are fitting, and I know the city also is on using the income and the non-English speaking population. We have a large number of census blocks that already called environmental justice, and by some broader standards, it's almost all of the census blocks in the city. And so we thought that looking at how the benefits are distributed, rather than necessarily the kind of proximity-based land use considerations that most environmental justice decisions are taken under, and that around the benefits would be a more efficient use of it.
Yes, I have one question or comment under the what problem will the plan address? That you mentioned lack of habitat for native pollinators, which in my mind, it probably is the biggest hurdle for pollinators, but it also makes me think, are there other hurdles to pollinators other than lack of habitat that we wanted to make sure the plan addresses, like use of pesticides or I don't know, other things like, are we missing anything there? That's another big problem for pollinators that isn't addressed in the lack of habitat comment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, it could be part of it, the lack of habitat, because it affects a habitat per se and reduce habitat if you have pollution. But being more explicit there might, be the positive things there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe in our middle category, this mitigate biodiversity loss might be paired with maintenance strategies or repair long-standing maintenance strategies that destroy habitat. I don't know, just something along those lines that maybe there's a link between those.
Okay, anything else before we move on to the next group?
I know we already talked about it. I'm having a really hard time with having the equity and environmental justice be low priority. I feel like that even if we're putting it somewhere else, it looks really bad that we're not prioritizing that. So I guess I don't understand why. I don't know. That feels like it should be maybe the main behind, co with increasing healthy pollinator habitat is that we do it equitably.
Yeah, which is the equal, maybe we can actually somehow have equity and environmental justice as the lead of the, Green Heart, the last one, right? The thing is, it was a little bit more descriptive somehow, rather than being a buzz, because often that's what happened. It becomes a buzzword with no real action behind the scene. So maybe it can be a title with, action-driven things behind, right? So that it's becomes descriptive in some sense, rather than just being a word, right? So yeah, because, right, Lucy,
I mean, what if the goal of the entire plan is to increase healthy pollinator habitat and do so equitably for the human population as well? And then not even pulling them out as high priority, but just that is the subheading of this action plan.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, I have a question. In your top priority, you have equal opportunity to access to open spaces and equitable access to co-benefits. Aren't those environmental justice issues that you've put in your top priorities rather than just having a title environmental justice? I mean, these are actual action steps that you're talking about.
Exactly. That's
That's exactly right. Is we didn't just want to say environmental justice because I think that that term, especially in the context of a project that's like this, that is so large. I think that we really want something concrete. We want to be able to give a concrete area for where we want that environmental justice effort, acknowledging that the whole city really needs environmental justice action.
Yeah, that was action rather than just, a title of some sort. That was what our rationale behind the scene, being action driven. Does it make sense?
I mean, it seemed like you weren't really saying that's a low priority. You were just saying this is repetitive, so we're going to move our sticky note here. So
That
maybe
was the rationale.
maybe just deleting that sticky note is the better way to do it.
That's,
So,
that
It's
was-
yeah, because I don't like the thumb down, right, on that
Yeah.
sticky note, because that's not our point. Our point is it's repetitive, and we prefer to have something that is action driven, delivering on that rather than having just a title, right?
I was also going to suggest just not having that sticky note under low priority.
Yep, I agree. I agree with that. Courtney,
You
what
could
do
also
I think
change
what
the
might be a good
language of low priority if you would like to.
No kidding.
what might be a good exercise for us to do is, instead of thinking about it as like high priority and low priority, we think about language that we want used to guide the scope versus language that we don't want to use to guide the scope, because I think that gets a little bit more into what we're doing here, which is guiding the RFP process, right? We're trying to guide the scope of the particular idea, and not necessarily saying that one particular thing isn't important. We just want to pick the terminology that best reflects our view towards it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Jack. Yeah.
That might be less applicable for the group that's coming up with deliverables, for example, but I think for your group that's talking very much about project vision, that changing that language, changing how you're thinking about that makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. Same thing, by the way, with when I look at the mental health. I mean, I did put a thumbs down, but it's not thumbs down. It's just subsumed by equal opportunity. So
What if there's a section of not unintended consequences, but like benefit on something, I'm spacing on the word, but something benefits like
So we actually were talking about ancillary benefits that
Yeah.
come up as a result of these, but
Yeah.
not as a direct, intentionality. So that's, I think that we were probably wanted to do this in a way that was a little bit more precise rather than the thumbs up, thumbs down approach. But I think that's exactly right. That's how we were looking at it.
yeah. Or byproduct, a term for me in my mind that comes is byproduct. Mental health is a byproduct of all the rest, right? All the priorities, right?
Does anybody need to leave right now?
You can
No.
stay 10 more minutes.
Okay, great. Claire, if you need to take off, you've already presented in your group. Great, that's fine. I just want to make sure, because we're already at 5:15. If you need to leave, totally understandable. But let's shift to group 2 just to try to get through all of them. Group 2, I think, did put stuff in the Jamboard at the end. Do you want to present off of that one?
Sure. I think we
Okay, so
we may
slide
have
8.
cheated a little bit. Because our two questions are like, what areas do we want to prioritize, and what kind of habitats do we want to prioritize? And our answer is really like, we want them to tell us what to prioritize. Like our answer is we want them to look at the whole city and all the habitats and then tell us what to prioritize, right? So I don't know if we really, answered that question fairly, because we kind of just put everything and then you tell us what the priorities should be. But, or Cynthia, I don't know if you want to explain it a different way, but.
No, that's kind of it.
So we try to we kind of put it into a few sticky notes, but that's basically what we're kind of thinking on both of those things, to have them look at everything and tell us where we think the city should prioritize, what are toolkits for people within the city who have different kinds of landscapes to work on, that they could kind of create those type of toolkits for us. And, also asking them to prioritize environmental justice when they're considering what spaces to use. But that was, we didn't really put a set priority on this area of the city versus this type of landscape. It was more like, we'd like them to tell us where they think we should prioritize.
Oh, and we didn't copy this over to this page, but we did start to talk about minimum requirements for the consultant team. Plant person, insect person, ecological landscape architect. And, you know, we think it's important that the team have some experience with urban environments and how cities work.
And I guess we did have one question on that was for the focus groups. We were wondering is it going to be the consultant's job to run those focus groups, in which case they'd need some experience doing outreach and you know, reaching different communities, or will it be the city running those focus groups and then just sending the feedback to them, whether that's something they do or something the city will do. We weren't sure if that's something they needed expertise in.
Any questions or devil's advocate questions for them?
Can I ask something? Oops. Quick thing.
Sure.
I'm going back actually to the Jamboard, your Jamboard. When we talk about plant expert, insect expert, and ecological landscaper, we're thinking about corridors, also natural corridors, understanding of natural corridors and dynamic of population of insects. Amy?
Yeah, I mean, we just started brainstorming that. But I guess part of the experience with urban environments probably would include, you know, you have to kind of do that kind of corridor thinking with urban environments. You don't have giant spaces. So yeah, we could kind of include that in the urban environment.
Because I feel like that, you know, corridor ecology is something different, right, than just
Right.
urban landscaping, right? So we need to weave these two things in.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'll add that in.
Does it seem feasible for the consultant job description? I feel okay with it.
May I ask a devil's advocate question? What exactly do you mean by ecological corridors when you're talking about the most densely populated and developed city in New England?
Generally, I think just the idea that, you know, we're not going to have one big giant open space that they can make into a huge pollinator meadow, that they have to think about using small spaces and connecting them in a way that it creates a sort of a corridor habitat so that insects can get from one patch to another, and, you know, thinking about how far different species will travel and what
Yeah.
kind of plants they'll need in each space to make it feasible. You know, not huge giant corridors, but little insect-sized corridors through the city to kind of make it into
There
a
were
landscape. that's feasible.
examples of that in the Lexington plan, sort of visual
But
representations.
Lexington and Somerville are like two different worlds. I mean, realistically speaking.
I'm still.
I don't disagree there, but the concept of knowing insects' flying ranges and foraging ranges is what that corridor stuff is talking about.
Okay.
Exactly. Otherwise, you create a little mini island and you don't solve the problem at the end, right? So you have kind of island effects. So you want to make sure that you connect these different parts and they can move.
I don't mean this to be a hostile question, but I just,
Oh, no. I
okay.
think it's important that we are all on the same, base, so we understand what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe we go to group 3 then.
We focused a lot of our time on thinking more about the tasks and deliverables and not a lot of time prioritizing as a group. So I kind of just threw things places. So we may or may not agree. We kind of thought all of our things were top priorities. So I had to try to squeeze some out at the end. Collecting the information about what there is one of the key, action steps that they need to start with, and really important things to provide in the end are like a short document toolkit with action steps for people to take, the bigger document, that has all the details for the city and whoever wants to dig into the details. So that kind of summarizes a bunch of our top priority things. So like more details of all of those. A few things I put in low priority was the recommendations of mapping tools. I only put that in low priority. We were just discussing that a lot because we think maybe some of the folks on the action committee might be able to make those recommendations internally. So like Claire, to put you on the spot. But we like all of our ideas. I don't know. Does anyone else think I put anything in the wrong spot or want to discuss anything in particular?
I was in the reporting. I have a question, Vanessa. So in the reporting, are you going to include or associate with partners so that there is a sense of metrics of results, which is not just about how many stuff we have, open spaces that are connected, but also how pollinators have increased, right? So I think working with partners is going to be important in this case so that we can help you measure actually impact of this plan. Because I think it's going to be important actually for the public to see the result, right? They're going to ask for that. We see that in our own studies, right? So they want to see the result in those terms.
Yeah. So you're thinking like building partnerships who can actually do the monitoring after the plan goes into place is an important link.
Actually, you're going to have to do it properly. The partnership should happen early on so that there is a before-after picture in terms of measuring,
Mhm.
So the partnerships are going to be important if you don't want to do it yourself as a city. That's what I mean. Which I don't recommend because it should be about collaboration. We should be strong that way, right? To start working as collaborators, every organization in this landscape. So metrics being incorporated through partnership, probably.
Mhm. And do you foresee the consultant team being the one to establish these partnerships, or is that maybe a role for us as the advisory committee?
I don't know, but I'm thinking that it's more of an advisory, probably. What do you think, Amy or Lisa?
I think the language we've been using for some other things is to sort of identify
Mhm.
the such things. So I'm just putting a sticky in to hold that. Because that can mean talking with the committee, it could be seeing who else is out there. Because even back to our talk with Louisa, like the wealth of resources we have in this area, that if this is the first sort of urban plan, who we can get involved in, from the beginning.
Mhm.
For some long-term monitoring and measuring the metrics. we can language tweak, but I think that's key to have in there. Yeah. Thanks. Barb.
Any other devil's advocate questions? Okay, I think we're pretty much out of time. So thank you everyone for all of this. Erica, thank you for being here. If you want to make it, you said you didn't have a comment, you can just wave and, but if you do want to say anything, you're welcome to.
No, I just think this is great. I'm very excited that I'm just a resident and gardener, and I'm very excited to know that this is in the works, and we're very happy to support in any way. But I've just been following the conversation. This is my first participation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming. So the next task for me is to do my best to take your comments and put them in a real document. I'm gonna draft this up, run it past city staff, just a sort of first pass, and then I'm gonna get it to the whole committee. I'm gonna try to think of a very clever way for you all to comment on this document. I don't need to do grammar checks at this point. We're just sort of like, okay, read it and like, are we on track here? What do we need to adjust? So the next meeting will be July 10th. And in order for me to get that written and turned around between the staff and the holiday, it's going to be, I'm going to try to get it to you, before the weekend, before our next meeting. So it's not a whole lot of time, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that will be coming so that you know that that's happening. And, the next meeting will be sort of to vet this and see, okay, like what isn't quite right yet. And then we're going to try to get it out to bid toward the end of July, early August if we can. So we'll see about procurement capacity as well. So there's like a whole city side of this too, which can take a little while. So I'm going to try to figure out the best order of operations on our end. But just know that draft will be coming, and I will do my best to translate your ideas and decisions into that. So thank you all for getting as clear as you could, even though I know you want everything, and we'll try to get as much as we can. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.